Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Braynard, you and I have never had any conversations, have we? We never
I,
had.
I
I'm
don't
Scot Turner.
recall. I don't
Yeah,
recall.
I don't think I heard your name before yesterday. As a matter of fact, I don't watch Lou Dobbs. Sorry I missed the interview, but and I really don't understand why it would matter who's paying you if the data can be independently verified. Have you worked with any Georgians who have given you any type of leads? Are there any activists who have come to the forefront that you're aware of, or have worked with, or have told you this is where you need to look?
No, and when other people are bringing different approaches to these questions, right? But it was my intent when I started this project that our findings would be geared at nothing that would require any speculation, only hard data that could be easily reproducible by someone else. Anybody, with just a little bit of common sense could actually do an NCOA match on the early and absentee vote. That's easily replicatable. So is the PO box leased and owned facilities. That's all easily replicatable. So we really want to avoid any kind of bias, and that you can decide how you weight certain mathematical formulas, and we didn't do any extrapolations, we did a sample size, so this therefore the entire population reflects the same. We never made any of those assertions. I've given names, voter ID numbers, records to other states, etc. Just really concrete things that are I would consider actionable.
So the reason why I asked the question the way that I did was to establish that before your testimony here, I had no idea what you were going to say. And yet earlier today, when Mr. Adams was testifying, I came in to make a very specific comment, and I made a very specific claim that there were some 15,000 people who had change of address forms where their registration didn't match their current address. And that was given to me by two Georgia activists who have been doing data analysis much like yours. And so it really doesn't matter who's funding it. These two guys are doing it because as a passion project, they care about democracy, they care about their country, and they found that there are these problems in the data. And that I said the 15,000 number earlier, and I believe you put the number at 15,700. So I'd say it's in the same ballpark.
I actually hate to interrupt, but I mean, I see what you're getting at. You're trying to say that these numbers came at independently, and
yeah.
There's actually a much easier way, to further validate that is that I actually have, when you run the NCOA analysis with the Postal Service, you get a receipt, and I have my receipt. If these gentlemen have their own separate receipts, well, I mean,
right
there you go.
So, yeah. So that reinforces the point that regardless of who's looking at the data is going to say the same thing over and over and over again. And I think it would behoove this committee, especially as they go into the next legislative session, to be looking at that type of data and making sure that when we, as a legislature, give the authority to certain individuals in the legislative branch, that are actually following through with the responsibility that they've been given. One last question, Mr. Braynard, and I do appreciate your time and flexibility in answering questions for the committee. As you mentioned that you have turned over the results of your findings to law enforcement or to the Secretary of State or other elected officials. Has there been any acknowledgement of that receipt? Have you been given any indication as to what action is being taken as a result of you turning that over?
Well, I believe the only confirmation I got was the FedEx package that arrived around noon yesterday was signed for. That's the only confirmation I think I've gotten. I believe that's from the Secretary of State's office. I've sent the data to the Attorney General's office. So I've got no other acknowledgement from it.
How about to the GBI or any other law enforcement agency?
I've not submitted the data to them, but if there's an agency you think in Georgia, the form letter is good to go. The data set's ready to go. It's very easy to understand. And included in all of my submissions is, the open invitation that if any of this is confusing to you or you have questions, I'm happy to answer those questions. I'm happy to help in any way I can to make it clear what these findings are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I believe Representative Nguyen had a comment or a question.
I do have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Braynard, I did have a chance to read through your affidavit and look at the exhibits that you attached to the affidavit. And you allege that there are individuals who cast invalid ballots, and you believe the claim you're making is within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. So I did take a look at the exhibits you attached, and I do want to share with you some of the things that I found that appear to be incorrect to me. And I'll just address these in orders of the exhibit attached, and I'll just, in the interest of time, highlight the most notable things that I found. The first exhibit attached, Exhibit 2, is a list of folks who were registered to vote in Georgia and have subsequently registered to vote in another state. Right off the bat in your affidavit, you testify that you cleaned up the list for duplicate entries, yet on the very first page of the exhibit, there are 3 duplicate voters. So I am concerned about the duplicate entries that may not have been removed from the exhibits. On that same page, what I did was I just took the first 10 names that were listed that are alleged to no longer be a resident in the state of Georgia. Of those 10 names, I found 8 property tax records that shows the voter still lives at this current address listed under which they're registered in the state of Georgia. They claim homestead exemption on this home as their primary residence, and they pay property taxes on their homes here in the state of Georgia. These are 2020 records that I will be submitting to the committee for review. Of these 10 voters that I researched, I was able to reach one voter on the phone. The voter verified that both he and his wife still live at this address in the state of Georgia, and he has only voted in the state of Georgia. He has a lengthy voting history that I was able to pull as well. From this very same list of individuals, one individual is alleged to be registered in both Georgia and Arizona. I was able to confirm her registration in Georgia and match her voter registration to a property tax record to confirm that she still holds residency in the state of Georgia as her primary residence. I cross-referenced her with Arizona's database and in fact did find a voter with the exact same name, and they are exactly the same age. However, the voter in Georgia was born January 17th and the voter in Arizona was born on April 17th. The voter also has a very common name, and I subsequently just typed in her full name, first, middle, and last name. In the state of Georgia, 117 people share this name, according to White Pages, and in the state of Arizona, 54 people share this name. There was another similar scenario with another individual on that same list, registered allegedly in both Georgia and Arizona. Same first, middle, last name, but they have different birthdays. They're different ages. One is age 48, one is age 49. The voter in Arizona has not actually voted since 2016. I'm going to move ahead in the interest of time to Exhibit 4. And you mentioned this earlier, voters who, in your affidavit, you allege that voters are using PO boxes to register and disguise PO boxes as their residential address to cast invalid ballots. In this exhibit, I immediately recognize one of the addresses. It's right around the corner from which I live, and I have friends that live in this actual building. It's a condo building with units on top, and it happens to have a FedEx center in the bottom of the condo complex. I reached out to my friend that lives there and informed him that both he and his wife are listed on your exhibit as having committed voter fraud by trying to disguise their residential address as a PO box. He subsequently sent me a list of all the homeowners in that same complex, and I cross-referenced them with their voter registration to confirm they live there. And then I also looked on your exhibit, and every single person that owns a condo in that building that voted in this election has been accused of disguising their residency as a PO box. I found a similar scenario for an address that is also an apartment building with a FedEx center in the bottom of the building. I know exactly where that building is because I have friends who used to live in that apartment complex, and a simple Google search will show you in real time that that is a residential apartment building with a FedEx center underneath it. Now, For those two buildings alone, I've identified at least 70 individuals in the first building that are on this exhibit, having been accused of disguising their residential address as a PO box. And on the second list, there are at least 58 folks that are named for that specific apartment complex. In Exhibit 5, this is the list of people who have alleged to have voted twice, one in the state of Georgia and one in a second state. One of the very first names on that list happens to be our colleague, Representative Tyria Nolowitz's neighbor. So we simply picked up the phone and called Representative Nolowitz, and she called the voter. The voter is alleged to have voted in the state of Maryland and also in the state of Georgia. The individual has confirmed that he currently lives in Georgia and has never voted in the state of Maryland. He, in fact, has not been to Maryland in the last year at all. He does have a father with whom he shares the exact same name, a senior and a junior. In another scenario, I was able to find an individual who allegedly voted in Georgia and also in the state of Virginia. The voters share the exact same name and age, but they have different birthdays. The Georgia voter born June 14th, the Virginia voter born June 2nd. On that same list, I happened to notice that one of the
Representative Nguyen, excuse me, how many more on your list are
This
there?
is my last scenario. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the last, one of the voters on my list happened to be my constituent. I attempted to call her, was unable to reach her. So I actually just drove over to her house and talked to her and her husband yesterday afternoon. They've lived in Georgia their entire lives, have lived in that same house since 1985. They've never even been to the state in which they're alleged to have double voted. Earlier, Mr. Adams did testify that there are circumstances in which voters have the exact same name, first, middle, and last name, and the same birthday. Based on what I found, I'm led to believe that many of the names listed on your exhibits are erroneous. And these allegations are very serious allegations. You've alleged that these voters have committed a felony. When I picked up that phone and I called my friend and let him know he was on that list, he and his wife were very surprised to learn that their names have been attached to a federal lawsuit, and there have been no attempts to contact them to verify any of this information. So these voters, in fact, have no idea they're being accused of committing a crime in a public filing where both their names and their addresses are listed. And these voters are both Republican and Democrat. It's not a partisan list. So to be clear, there are many people who have been accused of committing felonies, and there are many common names in these exhibits: Smith, Williams, Johnson, Taylor, Davis, Miller. In some cases, as you admitted earlier, you use birth years, in some cases, birthdays. But did you use any more specific unique identifiers such as social security numbers or driver's license numbers that would have actually been able to prove that these people are not, in fact, the same people?
Okay. Quite a lot of questions there. First of all, I actually want to thank you for helping to raise issues to help better validate the data. It's only with strong scrutiny that we're able to be completely confident in our findings. So to answer some of your questions, first, we never used anybody's just birth year. It was always had to be a complete match. In fact, because the default date for so many birth dates is the first of the month or the first of January, whenever that's those components are missing, we actually excluded everybody that was born on the first of the month or January 1st for any of our matching. Second, you bring up the issue of duplicates. In the total number of 20,300, is it 12, I think, that is a completely dedupe consolidation of lists. While individuals might have had multiple NCOA records, we have a completely unique list of county and voter ID numbers that totals 20,300. Regarding some of the other name issues that you've found and other issues that you've raised, as I mentioned, I'd be more than happy to address all of those. If you'd send them to me, I would give them an additional validation and scrutiny and get back to you on them.
I do have a follow-up question. As you mentioned, you said that you used complete birthdays. Where were you able to obtain those birthdays? Were they We know that the Secretary of State here in the state of Georgia doesn't provide birthdays. Where did you get those birthdays?
Right. Now, you've actually made a very good point. Remember, I'm a third party independent of the government. So many of the tools that would be necessary to catch a lot of the people that we think we've missed and to do further validation, those tools reside solely in the hands of the state government. So the driver's licenses, social security numbers, what I presume would be the state probably has its own list of dates of birth that it's not releasing publicly. It's sort of set up in the scenario that only the state can definitively answer those questions. Now, in my affidavit, I don't believe I specifically accused anybody of committing a crime. I said these were indications over and over again. Potentially illegal ballots has been my language. Indications of illegally cast ballots. I've not accused anybody of committing a felony in any of my affidavits or declarations. But again, many of these tools are only available to the state, and I'd be happy to work with them and give them guidance on how to apply them and to basically prevent illegal ballots from being cast. And I'd be more than happy to cooperate with them on that. So thank you for your questions and raising your points. And I look forward to evaluating the names you've identified and giving you feedback and updating you on that.
Thank you for that. And it is true that it is hard to obtain accurate information because a lot of this information is protected.
I didn't answer your question. Actually, dates of birth. Yeah, sorry. We have 5 different commercial date of birth vendors, each of whom has a confidence code that they use to determine the likelihood of that date of birth being accurate. We then applied our own level of scrutiny to that to do our very best to obtain what is we believe to be an accurate birth date. And I would say that in the research I cited on the uniqueness of names, dates, and dates of birth, it says that it's accurate up to 99.6. I've also in the same research found that NCOA is a valid method for identifying dead wood. So I rely on that research and the methods we have. And again, I've given this data to the state. They are the best arbiters and ultimate arbiters of it. I really just want them to give it the scrutiny it deserves. So again, I thank you for your questions.
And I do have one more final question. I'm sorry. I do have one more final question, Mr. Chair.
Representative Nguyen, we're going to move on. Representative Turner.
Thank you.
Really quickly, thank you for coming back to me. The Representative Nguyen's findings going to people's houses and knocking on doors and making phone calls. Obviously, that isn't going to happen on a wide scale, but there are ways for commercial addresses with the issue where there's a FedEx at the bottom and an apartment building at the top. There's a flag called CMRA or Commercial Mail Receiving Agencies, where a PO box is in the postal service, even if it's recorded on a voter data as being an apartment number, the CMRA is going to indicate that it's actually a PO box at the FedEx facility downstairs as opposed to an apartment upstairs. In your data, did you look at that particular flag? Was that one of the things that you looked at to determine where those folks actually lived, or if it was an actual PO box?
We used a couple of different analyses, and we also actually looked at other just commercial residences or commercial locations that would not likely be residences. But that's a question that I actually have to pull the material up and I have to talk to some of my staff that I worked with on this project. So I'd be happy to answer that one subsequently.
I would look forward to that. Thank you, sir.